Okay, so just wanted to tell you today about a couple of things that a lot of students are told they have to do in English to get better marks, but which don't actually work, or at least don't work as well as you might think. So these are surprising things. Now, the first one is that most of the time teachers tell students that they need to read more. Now, I'm in favor of reading, right? Reading is great. It's really good to read because you broaden your mind and you learn about different ideas. But actually just reading by itself isn't going to get you better marks or grades. Now, the reason for that is that most of the time, if you're just reading, you're not necessarily learning to analyze and understand and evaluate what you just read. So the point of reading is supposed to be to help you get better at writing for yourself, supposed to be to help you understand better how to come up with your own literary techniques, devices, how to come up with a storyline or a plot or whatever it is. However, it doesn't necessarily do that. If you just sit down with a book for half an hour and just read that book, then you will not necessarily be focusing your mind on the right things. You won't necessarily actually learn the things that you need to then discuss that are important in that book, or how to then apply them for yourself, because that's a whole nother skill, how to then go and do those things for yourself in a different context, in a different situation, because it's not a question of copying, it's a question of figuring out from the book what technique they used and why, and then applying that same method, that rule, to your own writing in a different situation. That's a complex skill. So what I recommend instead of just reading is that you spend, let's say instead of half an hour reading, just read for 15 minutes and spend the other 15 minutes analysing what you read, better yet, writing about it. So actually coming up with analysis about it. That will really help you to understand what the author has done and why, and then you'll be able to apply that in your own work. Okay, so the second thing that students are usually told is that they need to memorize a lot of quotes. And again, yes, you need to know some quotes. The problem is that examiners are not actually going to mark you based on how many quotes you memorize. And so students get worried about memorizing a long quote or loads of quotes or have whole lists, and they make that the whole of their revision for literature. And that's actually counterproductive because yes, it'll make some difference, but what's going to make a bigger difference is the quality of the analysis. If you only know one short quote, even if you don't get it completely accurate, you can still get marks for a reference, even if your quote is not totally accurate. If you know the important thing about it, like the gist of it, what it means, you know the important techniques in it, and you know why the author used it, you understand the actual thing you're trying to analyze. So improving your analysis is more important than improving the number of quotes you know. And again, most students focus on just learning the quotes, and that's why they miss out. If you just have a basic analysis, no matter how much you know, you're not going to get passed around a grade 4 or 5. Okay, so the third thing that students focus on too much, that they're usually told they have to do, which actually doesn't make that much impact, is to do with learning the names of lots of literary techniques. Now, especially for poetry, you need to know some. But again, it's a question of what one extra hour of revision, where to spend that extra hour to get the best return on that investment of time. And is it going to be learning the names and memorizing more information about literary techniques? Almost certainly not. It's more likely going to be that you'll get a better benefit from that time if you spend it practicing, analysing and comparing poetry, by practicing essays in timed conditions. Most students don't do enough of that because it's hard. Memorizing quotes or techniques, it feels like revision and it feels easy, and it's what teachers say you should do. And yes, you should do some of it because they're well-intentioned, but not as much as you do the actual practice of analysis and the actual writing of timed essays and timed bits of work under those conditions, so you practice doing the real thing. That's much more important, because here's the thing, that examiners don't look for whether you know the name of fancy literary techniques. Here are some examples of things that count as techniques: nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, connectives. Just the names of words. Or types of sentence, like a simple sentence, a complex sentence, or an extended sentence, depending on how long it is. Just identifying simple things like that. If you have to talk about the impact of a word, just identify the type of word it is. That's the technique. And then you tick that bit off, and then you can go and analyze and explain why that word has meanings, whether it has more than one meaning, different ways of interpreting it, how it makes the reader feel, why, and talk about that for 2 or 3 sentences to do deep analysis, and don't worry about memorizing the technique. And equally, if you do know the technique, if you know this poem's in iambic pentameter or trochaic tetrameter, you don't have to write about it. Just because you notice it doesn't mean you should write about it. Only write about it if you know why, and you can think of why the poet chose to use it. If you can't, you're not going to write good analysis, so leave it out. Okay, so I hope that helps, right, with a bit of myth busting. These three things make much less impact than most teachers and most students think. Well, I'm not going to say that most teachers think, but I'm going to say more than most teachers will tell you, because they're busy and it's easy advice to give. So that's it. Just try to implement this and try to analyze and practice in time conditions instead of memorizing. That will make a big difference. So if you remember one thing from this video, analyze instead of memorize. And in the meantime, hit the subscribe button if you found this useful, because we've got more videos on other areas of English and how to reach a grade 9, and I'm sure you'll find those useful too. See you soon.